Apparently, Alan Moore, the creator of the Watchmen series of comics, has an interview in an obscure Brazilian newspaper, or at least it's obscure to me. And he's talking about comic superheroes and how they shouldn't appeal to adults, only children. He makes a comment in that interview that is really interesting. He says that comic book superhero characters are still very much white supremacist dreams of the master race. I see that quite often in leftists, and it's a mentality that I find fascinating, partly because it actually shows these people to be very insular. They appear to have the idea that the entire world is the West. The West is the world. When you think about it, of course, superheroes are more often than not going to be white. If they're created by Marvel or DC, for example, of course they're going to be white because they come from a predominantly white society. You wouldn't expect a white superhero in a Nigerian comic. You'd expect black characters in a black country, and therefore you would expect white characters in a predominantly white country. And let's not forget, America was predominantly, much more so than today, a white country before changes to immigration in 1965. So when you have Superman being drawn and created, America was dominated by whites. To suggest that that means Superman is a white supremacist dream of the master race is insane. It's crazy. And that's what I find fascinating about the left, that they do think that the Western world is the world. They complain about Hollywood movies being too white. Well, you wouldn't complain about Bollywood actors being too brown, or Nigerian movies producing films where most of the characters are black. So why Hollywood? You can only make that argument if the entire world is the West. And that's why I say these people are very insular. They don't understand the world. They think that the world is everything around them. And so when they see themselves surrounded by white people, they call that white privilege. It's not a privilege, it's just the simple fact that you're living in a predominantly white country. If you moved to black Africa, you'd be surrounded by black people. Would that be black supremacy? But again, I come back to the point. This is an insular mindset. This is a very narrow mindset. These people have no real comprehension of the outside world. Their world is whatever surrounds them. And yet we give these people so much credence. We give these people so much importance in our society. These people that ultimately complain about things like whiteness and how it's a problem that must be overcome. These people essentially are genocidal. They want the destruction of white people. So to add to that insularity, you have to also bring rampant racism. And when you add to that the fact that they have these fantasies about violence, about extreme violence, these people are incredibly dangerous. Sometimes I thought about, how could you be a camp guard at Auschwitz? How could you live with that level of violence and that horror and perpetrate that each and every day on defenseless people? And when I look at people like Alan Moore, I understand where those people come from. They come from people like Alan Moore, people that have this ideology that's taken over them, this narrow view of the world. It's not white people that dream of white supremacy and being the master race. It's people like Alan Moore that have a twisted and perverted view of the world in which only their extreme violence can correct. What is worrying is that people like Alan Moore have control in the West today. People like Alan Moore with that view that simply by being white that you are the enemy. Look, you couldn't say these things about Jews today. You couldn't advocate openly for the genocide of Jewish people in the way that you can about white people. These are incredibly dangerous times, and it's not the far right, it's not white supremacy. It's a far left that are conjuring up all these hate figures that if they get the opportunity, they will do extreme violence too. You can see that sometimes now in feminists. Feminists are fantasizing about violence against men. The left is fantasizing about violence against white men. If we don't stop these people, if we don't have the courage to say stop, no, what you are advocating is wrong, then all we're doing is we're opening the doors to these people. We are not saying stop to so many people on the left in the way that we really need to. Time and again these people come to us and say, we want this, we want that. No matter how outrageous their demands become, we just keep saying yes, out of some strange apologetic nightmare, obsession with admitting some sort of guilt just for existing. But all we're doing is we're enabling these people. They won't stop asking for more and more extreme things. The only way to stop them is simply to say stop. We must stop allowing people with this ideology and this mindset to control the narrative and to control events. If we don't do that, if we don't learn to stand up to these people and say no, then things are going to get very, very bad indeed. We must learn to say no.